Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to help you lead more confidently and make a bigger difference, both professionally and personally. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's free weekly e-newsletter, Unleashing Your Remarkable Potential, which is full of articles and resources to help you become a more confident and successful leader. Sign up by going to remarkablepodcast.com/newsletter. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to another Live with Kevin, another remarkable leadership podcast. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Would you like to be happier and more productive? Would you like to learn what the most successful people do to create both of those things at the same time? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. You can get all future live episodes and therefore interact with us and see them sooner. If you're a podcast listener and you're hearing this later, you could be getting it sooner by being with us live. And you can learn all about how to do that by going to our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook where you can actually watch them directly, or go to remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. We'd love to have you join us there. But while you're here, especially if you're here live, I would like you to imagine that you're joining my guest and I for a cup of coffee or tea, in my case. Please share your questions, your comments, your ideas, because I'll share them out with my guest, and they'll make for a better conversation and eventually a better podcast as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Remarkable Masterclasses. Each month, we release a new skill in an advanced form of a masterclass format, each designed to help you become the remarkable leader and human you were born to be. Details on how to get on board for a specific skill or to get discounts each month can be found at remarkablemasterclass.com. And with that, let me bring in my guest. There he is. If you're here with us live, you can now see his smiling face. His name is Dr. Roger Hall. Let me introduce him, and then we will dive in. Dr. Roger Hall is the author of Staying Happy, Being Productive, the 10 Big Things Successful People Do, and the book Expedition as well. He is a business psychologist with clients all over the country. He has one trick. Roger, does that mean you're a one-trick pony? He has one trick. He trains leaders to monitor and manage their thinking. Great leaders work on themselves first, and then success in their companies follow. His clients are entrepreneurs, professionals, business owners. He is especially qualified to help entrepreneurs who have had a financial event, that's a positive financial event, find meaning, purpose, and happiness for the next phase of their lives. He has had the chance to consult and speak with all sorts of groups, from judges in federal courts to people in the intelligence community, company owners, executives, university faculty, to social workers, teachers, nurses, and to construction workers, landscapers, and box makers, and now to all of you here live and on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. He loves his work as a keynote speaker for financial services companies and more. He received his doctorate in psychology from Ohio State University in 1991. He is currently an executive coach for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Clinical Scholars Program. He and his wife live outside of Boise, Idaho, but today he is in Columbus, Ohio, now the home of the Ohio State University. Roger, welcome. I'm so glad. He was chuckling about that because we were talking about the Ohio State versus Ohio State, and he was giving me the history of all that. So, Roger, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Oh, I'm grateful to be here, Kevin. Thank you.
It is a pleasure. And for those of you that are here with us live, whatever platform that you're on, that you're watching us live, you can send a question, send a comment. Let us know where you're from. In fact, just tell us. You now know that Roger's from Boise and that I live in Indianapolis. So you can tell us where you are as well. And if you're watching later on one of the social channels, you can still ask your questions. We'll see them. If I get a chance, we'll ask Roger, give you some answers, send you some resources or whatever. So enough of that. Roger, I want to start by doing what I almost always do, which is ask people to tell us about their journey. You know, I know that you grew up with a father who was a professor, but you probably didn't grow up thinking you were going to become a clinical business psychologist.
That is correct. That was the furthest thing from my mind. My dad was a professor of agriculture And so I'm a long way from home in this profession. And I had absolutely no idea I would become a psychologist one day. I was a communication undergrad and went to talk to one of my professors about how do I apply what I'm learning in real life. And he said, well, you get a PhD in psychology. And I said, well, what about a PhD in communication? And he says, no, then you'd be like me. And I said, well, is that so bad? And he said, yeah, I hate my job. And so I marched over to the Department of Psychology and added a double major in an afternoon and spent a year working on that. I applied to graduate school in all the wrong ways. What I really wanted to do was help healthy people do better to reach their peak performance. So I've always been a student of attitude change and persuasion. And so I'm in the business of attitude change and persuasion.
And your trick is training leaders to monitor and manage their thinking. So in the book, we talk about that a little bit. You talk about 10 skills, 10 parts of our lives, and one of them is our thought life. And so I thought we'd start there. Since your bio says that that's your one trick, we should talk about first of all, what do you mean by monitoring our thoughts? Let's just start there.
Yeah, let's go to the Wayback Machine. And the Wayback Machine will go back to ancient philosophy. And one of your previous guests talked about the Stoic philosophers. Mm-hmm. And the Stoic philosophers are guys like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and all of them talked about the importance of disciplining your thoughts. And in the 1950s, a guy named Albert Ellis, who's one of the fathers of cognitive behavioral therapy, he and Aaron Beck kind of share that honor. But Ellis was reading the Stoic philosophers, and he said, I got so much more help from reading these guys who've been dead for 2,500 years than I did from Freud and Jung, that I decided to create a psychotherapy based on it. And principally, what Seneca and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius said is that if you discipline your thinking, the emotions will follow suit. And what we know now about our basic brain biology is that our brains are put together in such a way that the most reliable, it's not the only way, but the most reliable way to manage unpleasant emotions or unproductive behaviors is to first work on the thoughts that drive all that.
Okay, stop right there.
Yeah, sure.
Because some people are listening to this while they're exercising on a podcast sometime from now. I need you to say that again, and I need everyone to stop all the multitasking and hear it, because this is so important. Say that again, Roger.
So the way our brains are put together is that the most reliable way, not the only way, but the most reliable way to manage unpleasant emotions and unproductive behaviors is to monitor and manage the thoughts that drive that. So we all have a stream of consciousness that's running through our head at all the time. We're telling ourselves things all day long, and very few of us ever stick a ladle or a bucket in that stream of consciousness to see what's in there. And so great leaders, great thinkers are monitoring. And in my business, we call it metacognition. It's thinking about your thinking. But you don't need to use a fancy word. You just stick the bucket in the stream of consciousness and sample what's in there. And when I do that with the leaders I work with, most of them find that there's garbage swimming in their stream of consciousness. And our job is to then strain out the garbage and clean up the stream of consciousness.
Man, so first of all, I'm gonna, just for all of you who are watching or listening, I always figure there's always, when I do this, at least one moment like, okay, that's worth the whole show. We just had one of them, and we're not even 9 minutes in.
We just got started.
I know we just got started, but my point is, if for all of you that are listening or watching, like that is so critically important, and it's important because you're hearing it from someone that really knows what he's talking about from the research, not just from someone like me who would say that, and you say, okay, well that's just Kevin or whatever. No, this is what the science tells us, And that's why it's so very important. And it's one of the many reasons why I wanted to have you on. And I already said that we are talking to you about your new book, or it's not really that new now. And of course, depending on when someone watches or listens to us,
It could be really old,
but still really relevant. Staying happy, being productive. And you can do them both at once.
yes.
Amazingly, some people think, well, I could do one or I could do the other. But you're saying we could do both. And you say that there are 10 things that we could do. And one of them is to understand our thought life, to think about that, I love the metaphor, dip the bucket into the stream. Love that. I promise I'll steal that.
But
I will attribute it to you, Roger, but I promise that I'll use that. It's just too good. Now, so there are, well, let me just say one more thing about that before we go on. So, okay, most of us aren't looking at what's in the stream. We're not monitoring or noticing it. But once we've done that, how does it help us? Once I pulled the bucket out and I look at what's in there, like, how does that help me?
Well, when we talk about happiness, when we talk about productivity, happiness is an emotion, productivity is behavior, right? And so if you want to have a happier life, and when I say happy, I don't mean entertained or fun, which are both pretty important. But happiness is really about purpose and meaning in life. The ancient philosophers called it eudaimonia, which is different than hedonism. Hedonism is the pursuit of pleasure. Eudaimonia is the pursuit of meaning and purpose. So
this is the Declaration of Independence meaning.
Yes,
fundamentally,
yes, the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of meaning. Yes. So when we look at really happy people, they first get their thinking right, then the emotions follow, then the behavior follows. I mean, the reason you do this is because you feel miserable all the time, or you're doing stupid stuff that makes you have a less good life. And this is the most reliable pivot point to change that. And it's not complicated. Let me use that word. It's not complicated to do, but it is hard, because it's like push-ups. Everybody can know what to do with a push-up, but doing them and doing them repeatedly, that's the hard part.
Indeed. So the book has 10 of these areas, thought life being one, and being the first one, as it turns out. So what I thought we would do is that we will pick two. I'm going to pick one.
Yep.
That you do not, that for all the rest of you don't know that he knows that I'm going to pick. He doesn't know I'm doing any of this, actually. I thought I'd pick one, and then you could pick another one, whichever one you feel led to in this moment.
Sure.
Whatever, I don't care. Use whatever criteria you want after I pick the one I'm going to pick. Are you up for that?
I'm up for
doing this?
Yep.
So here's Roger. He's thinking, what is Kevin picking? What, I wonder. And because you're so smart, you're probably going to have all sorts of reasons why Kevin picked it. But here it is. We're going to talk about our sleep life.
Yes. I'm so glad you asked.
Another one, because that's the one you were going to pick. If I was
going to add it. Yes.
All right. So, all right. So 10 big things. You could talk about 40 things that we could all work on. This is one of you picked. So first of all, why did you pick this as one of the most important things that we need to get better at, and then one of the things that really truly successful people are good at?
Yeah, so it's called sleep and rest life. So there are two parts of it, but let's focus on sleep right now. The reason I'm glad you chose this is that when people say, well, which one should I start with first? Because there's 10. I always say, work on your sleep first. Now, I lived much of my adult life. I was in college, I was in graduate school, I stayed up late. I used to stay up till 2 a.m. working and being real productive, getting up and quote, surviving on 6 hours of sleep. And that was because I was in my 20s and I had a lot of capacity to recover. But what I have found is, and I used to view sleep as completely inefficient. Why do I have to sleep this long? It's so inefficient. And the more I learn about sleep, the more I realize that if I want to be effective in my life, I have to get good sleep. And here's why. When you sleep, your brain is recovering and repairing. So there are these chemicals that get dumped into your brain while you're asleep. They're called neurotrophins, which means building neurons, neurotrophins. And there's one called, it's a long name, it's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And this is the thing that your brain secretes while you're asleep to help the neurons grow and repair. So every day, your brain is taking a hit and it needs to grow and repair. Now, here's the interesting thing is your brain is growing all the time throughout your life. You're constantly growing and repairing your brain. And you need BDNF and the other neurotrophins to help it grow and repair. Much of that's done at night. Now, here's the other interesting thing. This is relatively new research, is all of your body has blood going to it, except the brain. So there's this stuff called cerebrospinal fluid. So there's no blood actually touching brain cells. It passes through the cerebrospinal fluid. And so the exchange is not as efficient with blood. But at night, and this is really weird, your brain kind of contracts and expands. So it's like a sponge going back and forth. And what it's doing is it's moving all the ick that gets stuck in your brain during the day through the cerebrospinal fluid to get rid of it. So you actually need sleep for your brain to get rid of the waste products and repair and recover. So you want to be healthy, you want to be happy, you want to avoid dementia in old age, get good sleep.
All right, we can mic drop right there, everybody. I've got to put this note up. I happen to know this gentleman. Hello, Bruce. He says, I need Roger to ship me a filter. The more experienced I get, the more float Sam in the stream. That's been there for a minute, but I wanted to wait to let you finish on your piece there. So,
thank you, Bruce.
Exactly. So here's the question: how do we know if we're sleep deprived?
So there's a book. It's written by a guy named William Dement. He's one of the fathers of sleep research. It's an older book, but he says that if you can fall asleep in less than 15 minutes, you're sleep deprived. Besides your dog, yeah, guilty, right? Besides your dog, the only person in your house who's not sleep deprived is 8 years old. Because you tell your 8-year-old, go to bed, I'm not sleepy. You'll fall asleep soon. And they call out 5 minutes later, I'm still not sleepy. You'll fall asleep. And eventually, 15 minutes later, they fall asleep. But if you can fall asleep in less than 15 minutes, you're sleep deprived. And Dement has this little experiment. He says, get a plate and a fork. I know that like this doesn't make sense. Just hear me out. And lay down on your couch, put the plate next to your hand holding the fork. Look at your watch and then close your eyes. He says, when you fall asleep, your hand will relax, let go of the fork. It'll hit the plate. It'll rattle. It'll wake you up. And then you'll know how long till sleep onset occurs.
Okay. So now I don't know if this is true or not. But the story that I've heard more than once, which still doesn't necessarily make it true, is that Thomas Edison would lay down to take a nap, or would sit down to take a nap. Have you heard this story?
No, keep going.
He had a heavy ball in his hand, and he would hold on to it. And that when he relaxed enough for it to fall and hit the ground, he did this for a different purpose, but it's the same idea. When the ball hit the ground, it would wake him up, and he would write down whatever he was thinking, because he was using that as a creativity stimulation thing. I'm sure it's connected in some way. You want to, again, everybody, I'm not saying that that's actually happened. I have read it more than once, but I've also learned that sometimes things aren't always what we've heard.
Well, I don't know that about Thomas Edison, but I do know that time between sleep and wake, your associations are really loose, and some creative ideas do come. There's lots and lots of apocryphal stories about people who came up with scientific revolutions in their dreams. And so there's a lot to be said about the importance of getting good sleep. And again, it illustrates that you want to have great ideas. you want to be productive in whatever you do, make sure you're getting good sleep, because that's how you recover and recharge.
All right. The big question just came in.
Yeah.
Does it happen in naps
too?
What's the role of naps here?
Yeah. So, the United States is one of those few, and Northern Europe are those few cultures that don't have a midday nap. Like if you went to Barcelona, you'd be taking a nap in the middle of the day. You'd be eating at 9 o'clock at night, and be going to bed late. There are lots and lots of cultures that sleep in the middle of the day. So naps are fine. Now, here's the problem with naps is that if you sleep for too long, you'll get into a stage of sleep that you can't get out of easily. And so you're grumpy and groggy for the rest of the day. Now, we've all experienced that. We wake up, it's like, oh, if I take a nap, I'm just, I'm dead for the rest of the day. Well, yeah, it's because you slept too long. Yeah, 2 hours. You're in a very deep stage of sleep, and it's really hard to rouse out of that. And there are about 5 different stages of sleep. You get in the hard to rouse stage, and you're just a grumpy, lethargic mess for the rest of the day. 20 minutes to maybe an hour, you're probably good on a nap. And so if you nap, knock yourself out. It's good for you. Prior to the advent of electricity, people used to go to bed when it was dark. They'd wake up in the middle of the night. They'd talk to their bed partner for a couple hours. They'd fall back asleep and wake up in the morning, which is why they had like 14 kids. But
that's a different podcast.
That's a whole different. That's the love life chapter. But if we look at that, people used to sleep differently than we do now. But however your sleep cycle goes, your mom was right. As an adult, you need about 8 hours of good sleep per night in order to go through all the different sleep cycles.
So we've got a comment that says, I'm always sharper in the morning. That's certainly me too. And that's connected, but that's not true for everybody, right? Different people have different cycles, right?
Right. Everybody has a different cycle, but yes, I find that to be true for me as well, that if I want to do my best work, I do it in the morning. And I encourage people that I work with not to focus on time management, but to focus on energy and attention management, and do all of your best work, your most important work, in the time when your concentration is sharpest.
At your best. What I call your power time. Absolutely.
That's a great way to describe it. Yeah.
Rebecca asked this question. What about regular use of melatonin?
Yeah. So melatonin is a precursor to a thing that helps you. It's part of the sleep cycle. So your body will convert melatonin into other things. Like anything, if you take it continuously, your body, which manufactures melatonin and manufactures all of the other neurotransmitters, will say, hey, there's plenty of this in our system. There's no reason for us to make any more. We'll use our resources to do something else. What does that sound like? Well, when the factories shut down making your own melatonin, when you withdraw melatonin that you buy from the store, what happens? Well, the factories are shut down. You're going to have what's called rebound insomnia. So melatonin is helpful in the short run, but if it is used long term, your brain and your body will say, hey, there's so much around, we don't need to make any more. And then when you stop taking it or you run out, you get rebound insomnia. And then you think, gosh, I got to take more. And so you get in this cycle of becoming dependent on melatonin for good sleep. Now, again, helpful in the short run, probably not great in the long run.
It just reminds me, if people don't know what Roger's describing, just think about everything that you experienced during the pandemic when things weren't available, and then the long-term withdrawal of us getting shingles and whatever else back because it wasn't being made for a while. Same thing.
Same thing.
It's a supply and demand. It's logistics. It's a logistics issue.
Yeah, your body's logistics system is working the lump in the pipeline.
Exactly. So I simplified by saying our sleep life. You said our sleep and rest. So talk about rest a little bit, and then I'm going to let you pick whatever other one you want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm so glad you reminded me to get to the rest life. so much of our life is busy. And you're listening to podcasts, you're watching live streams, whatever you're doing, you're a busy person. Well, our brains are designed for rest, quiet reflection, contemplation, meditation, mindfulness. And so each of us needs time each day and time each week to do, and this is going to drive some of you crazy, to do nothing. And people say, well, like, you mean reading a book? No, that's a cognitively complex task. Well, what about watching TV? No, that's a cognitively complex task. Maybe not as cognitively complex. Listening to music, all of that. I mean, doing nothing. You can sit on your porch and watch the wind blow through the trees. And if you do that for 5 minutes, that's fantastic. We all know that feeling when we're sitting at the beach watching the waves come in and we have no responsibilities. It's almost hypnotic. Or if we're watching a fire, we're watching a bonfire and we're watching the flames and it's almost hypnotic. That's because the rhythm of the waves and the movement of the flames puts us into an altered state of consciousness. It's a contemplative state. Some people call it fixed attention meditation. And so we need that every day for our brain to recharge and recover.
I love it. I love it. By the way, I'll pick the fire over the waves. I don't have any problem with the waves, but I like the fire. So there's another question that came in about, okay, so our melatonin person is also asking about calcium and magnesium. You're going to comment about that quickly?
I'm not as smart about that kind of supplementation. I think calcium and magnesium are important for every cellular communication. So on a cellular level, we need calcium and magnesium, potassium, and chlorine to make our nervous system go. So it's worthwhile to see if you need supplementation. And again, I can't give recommendations to particular individuals. Talk to a nutritionist, talk to someone who's smart about nutrition. But calcium and magnesium are really, really important. And we'll touch on it, though this isn't the area I want to focus on, which is nutritional life, which is each of us needs to take in good food and good nutrition to fuel our bodies. And calcium, magnesium is one example of that.
So I'm going to let you pick I'm going to put a couple comments in. We've said, she said she's going to kick her melatonin gummy habit for now. Someone said, you're talking about this rest piece, exercise, and just stopping and looking at the trees, right?
Yes, absolutely. Spend time looking at the trees. Exercise is one of the big 10. The cheapest, least invasive way to improve your mood is to get daily regular exercise. You want to be happy, move your body.
There you go. So I said you could pick one. And
yeah,
now we've
already
talked about others. We've talked
cheating.
about thought life. We've talked about rest and sleep and rest life. You mentioned nutritional life. Yep. You mentioned love life. What one are you going to pick for us to take 5 minutes or so to dive into?
So let's talk about work life, and I'll touch on love life and work life. If we look at the Harvard study of men, which is a study of men from the 1930s up till today, most of the guys are dead. They're now studying their wives and their kids. But in his book, The Triumph of Experience, the author George Valent, who was the curator of this study, pretty much said the two most important things are: do you have a strong primary love relationship? So your love life, the people who are in your immediate family, your immediate circle. But the second piece was the importance of work life. And if you're looking for purpose and meaning in your life, having a vocation that you enjoy or some purpose for your life is vitally important. When they studied these men in the Harvard study of men, they compared Harvard students with guys in Boston who weren't at Harvard, and they thought, in the 40s, these Harvard men would be more successful, more happy, blah, 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 blah. Well, they did have more money, but they weren't at all more happy or more fulfilled with purpose. And so what they found, and what I've seen, is that we find purpose in our life typically in our work, and half of our waking life is done at work. Now, if you have a soul-crushing job, start looking for another job. Now, I'm really blessed, Kevin, because my work is also, I find purpose in it. Many people work just to make a buck, and they find their purpose elsewhere. Well, that's fine. But it's important that you find your purpose elsewhere. And when we look at why work is so important, is there's a researcher, his name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I'm not making that up. I used to butcher his name, and then a Hungarian woman spelled it out for me. So his name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And just type in Mihalyi, and Google will autocomplete it. You don't have to spell it. What he talked about, and he introduced the concept of flow. And what he said was, when you're concentrating on solving a challenging problem in your domain of expertise, you lose the sense of time. You lose the sense that you're different than your work. And what he found is that people are happy when they experience flow every day or nearly every day. So if you want to have life satisfaction, then it's concentrating on a problem that's challenging in your domain of expertise. So for me, when I'm solving a people problem or an idea problem, I'm in flow. When I'm talking to you, I'm in flow. When I'm giving a speech, I'm in flow. When I'm solving plumbing problems, I am never in flow because I'm not skilled in that area. So it creates anxiety for me. Now, I sure hope my plumber is experiencing flow. And, that's where he experiences flow. And that's why he's good at his job. And this is why I'm lousy at plumbing. And so it's finding that set of activities where you can concentrate and solve the kinds of problems that you like. And if you can make a living doing that, rock on.
So there's an interesting comment has come in, and
Yeah.
we probably don't have time to go into this very deeply, but I think it's useful. Have you heard of research into retirees, those who had hobbies, etc., phased into retirement, live longer generally than those that just stop working and lose purpose?
Yeah. The study most people refer to is a study in England of people, and it said that people who didn't have a productive activity after retirement died about 5 years after retirement. There's a confound in that study, in that the people who were retiring may have had, comorbid health problems, and that's why they retired. But I have looked at people who have retired, and I am not a fan of retirement, which is, if you have productive capacity, if your brain is sharp and you're able to contribute, why would you stop working so you can buy an RV, drive around, and in 6 months be bored again?
What is something that you do for fun?
I like to be outside. I live next to the Boise National Forest. So 2 days ago, my wife and I went for a hike with our dog. If I can get out in the outdoors, I feel great. And I love to read. So those are the two things I like to do for. And I love movies. I love the movies. So I'll be glad to get back to the movie theater.
Well, the one question I told you I was going to ask you relates to reading. So tell us something you're reading. You've given us a couple of great books already here, but what's something you're reading now, Roger?
So my wife read a book about World War II and Winston Churchill and the Battle of Britain called The Splendid and the Vile. And the author contrasts a look at Churchill and then the Nazi leadership. And as a student of attitude change, persuasion, I'm interested, about the way that Goebbels, the minister of propaganda changed people's attitudes. So right now I'm reading a book called How Propaganda Works, to figure out how did national leaders change the mindset of all of these people. And I think in the research I've done on attitude change, it doesn't matter your political affiliation, if you're left, right, or center, the techniques are all the same. And so I just find it interesting. How do we influence people for the good? And so I'm reading How Propaganda Works after having read The Splendid and the Vile.
Perfect. So we got 2 books. We'll put them both in the show notes for the podcast when it comes out, and hope that you will take a look. This, by the way, Roger, doing this podcast every week is one of the most expensive habits I have. I'm not going to say anymore. You already figured it out. Okay. So the question now you've been wanting me to ask since the beginning, what that means is I don't have that many other vices, at least not ones that are expensive. Except perhaps antique tractors, but that's a whole nother.
Oh, that's a whole different order.
Whole different conversation. So where can you point people? I know that, I'll hold the book up for people that are watching. Where can people learn more, find out more about what you're up to? I know you've got a course that you want to share with people.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the book, Staying Happy, Being Productive, the Big 10 Things Successful People Do, is available on Amazon. It's also available on my website or at the which is drrogerhall.com, drrogerhall.com, or you can go straight to order the book at stayinghappybeingproductive.com. I have an online course to help people overcome fear called Freak Out, Fear Less, Live More, because in this last year, I have been helping people screw their heads back on right because everybody has been freaking out. And so it's a 4-session, 10 hours of material to help people not freak out.
So if you feel like you're freaking out, that's the place to go. You can get everything. You can start at drrogerhall.com and find everything from there. I hope you'll do that. Roger, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm so grateful, Kevin, to be invited. Thanks so much.
Before we go, though, I have a question and so don't leave quite yet, Roger. Before we go, I've got a question for everybody else. Whether you're watching live, you're watching later, whether you're listening later, I don't care. I have a question for you. If you've been with us to this point, the question is, now what? What are you going to do as a result of this? Maybe you're going to say, I'm going to take a nap. Maybe you're going to say, I'm going to dip the bucket into the stream and get a sense about what my thoughts are. Maybe you're going to look for some moments of quiet. There's 100 things that came up today that you could make as your action point. I just noted a few of the things that were obvious that came up as we went. I hope that you will take a chance to do that, because if you don't do that, there really wasn't much value in joining Roger and I, as much fun as he and I had doing it. And so now I will say again, Roger, thank you so much for being here.
Kevin, I am grateful to be invited, and I love that takeaway. What's the thing you're going to do now? Love it.
And with that, everybody, that's another episode, both live on a Monday as well as on the podcast. Hope that you'll come back again. I'll be back live again next week, and we'll be back every week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.